According to Jeremy Black, World War II, beginning in 1939 and lasting until 1945, was a series of connected worldwide conflicts that each had their own respective consequences. World War II impacted families, almost without exemption, all across the world in many different ways. The Duff family was no different. Although only two family members were participants of the war, the events of World War II would shape their lives and the course of the family for generations to come. A brief history of the Duff family begins with a look at John Duff and his descendants. This information has been gathered through genealogical research done by family members, and this presentation will rely heavily on interviews of family historians Barrett Duff and Kathy Andrews. For the purpose of continuity, this line will be strictly traced through to the author of this presentation. John Duff, parents unknown, was born in Tennessee in 1810. He married Sarah Haynes in 1835. Together, they had 5 children. Absalom Duff was the 4th child and was born in 1842. Absalom married Margaret Barrett in 1872, and together they had 4 children. William Henry Duff was the 3rd child and born in 1878. William married Effie Catherine Crawford in 1904, and together they had 4 children. 2 of the children will be participants of the Second World War and the focus of this investigation. The children of William and Effie were Hallie Helen Duff, William Herman Duff, Marion Crawford Duff, and Barrett Sale Duff. Marion Crawford Duff would marry Louisa Halbrook, who would give birth to Marion Catherine Duff. Marion Catherine had 3 children, and her youngest was Catherine McGivney, who married Joseph Andrews. Together, they would have 3 children. The oldest, Emily Andrews, is the author and narrator of this presentation. The image you see is the William Henry Duff family in 1946, in front of the Plummerville, Arkansas home of Will and Effie Duff. The photo includes Crawford and Louisa Duff, Barrett Duff, and Kay Duff, among other family members. All photos presented in this presentation are primary photograph sources held in possession by the family. When World War II began in 1939, the Duff family members that would be eligible for participation or connection in the war were the 4 children of William Henry Duff and Effie Catherine Crawford. As Hallie Helen Duff died at age 5 months, the 3 surviving children will be focused on. The photo on the left is William Herman Duff, circa 1926, who was born in February of 1906 in Plummerville, Arkansas. In 1934, he married Martha Frances Hudson, and they had 1 child. For a career, William entered the profession of banking. Before World War II, he spent time working for the Bankers Trust in Little Rock, Arkansas, and the Federal Reserve Bank in Little Rock, Arkansas. By 1943, Herman was seconded to the Alien Property Custodian for the Mitsubishi Shipping Company in New York City, where he audited the assets of that group. The photo in the middle is of Marion Crawford Duff, circa 1920, the second son of William Henry Duff and Effie Catherine Crawford. The affectionate nickname given to Marion Crawford, as provided by Barrett Duff, was Taw. Taw married Louisa Halbrook in 1932, and they had 2 children. Taw was a man of exceptional physical strength. In his youth, he worked at one of the local cotton gins after school during the busy season, where he single-handedly double-decked 500-pound bales of cotton into railroad boxcars. After graduation from high school, Taw also went into the banking field, working several years in the Bank of Plummerville. Simultaneously, he held several side jobs, including going door-to-door to collect utility bills, as was the custom in those days. He also served as a helper to the carpenter-plumber team that installed piping and wiring in most of the homes in Plummerville. During the busy cotton chopping and picking seasons, he would help on the Duff farm. During World War II, he farmed the Duff farm, where he was exempted from military service. Taw's contributions to the Second World War do not extend beyond this. The photo on the right is of Barrett Sale Duff in 1943 at Fort Benning, Georgia. Barrett Sale Duff was born on February 10, 1923, at home in Plummerville, Conway, Arkansas, the third son of William Henry Duff and Effie Catherine Crawford. After completing 8 years of schooling in Plummerville, he entered the Gulf Coast Military Academy in Gulfport, Mississippi in 1936. Barrett graduated from the GCMA in 1941 as honor graduate and commanding officer of the ROTC Corps of Cadets. In the summer of 1940, he graduated from the ROTC Army Infantry School at Camp Anniston, Alabama. In the summer of 1941, he completed 3 courses in mathematics at John Brown University in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, where he met his wife-to-be, Margaret Peggy Spivey. In 1941, September, he entered Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, as a freshman engineering student. The 2 members of this immediate family who would become participants of World War II respectively are William Herman Duff and Barrett Sale Duff. Before discussing William Herman Duff's involvement in World War II, it is important to lay a brief foundation of the war's conflicts. According to Gerhard Weinberg, the global war was started by Germany in September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The war lasted until 1945 when Germany and its associates, particularly Japan, were defeated. The war was fought on many different fronts and oceans. When examining the different sides of the war, global powers can be divided into the Axis powers and the Allied powers. The Axis powers were primarily made up of Germany, Italy, and Japan. The Allies included the United States, Great Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and China. In short, the Allied powers were attempting to stop the spread of Nazi Germany in Europe and the Empire of Japan in the Pacific. Around the time William Herman Duff was working in New York City, the U.S. government, and he was working in New York City in 1943, the U.S. government was criticized for exempting so many employees from the World War II draft, and as a result, in 1944, at the age of 38, Herman was drafted into the infantry. One can imagine that after having worked in an office his entire life up to that point and being adverse to exercise, boot camp at Camp Roberts, California, must have been an agonizing experience for him. Upon completion of his basic training, Herman was assigned to the 89th Infantry Division as a combat medic. The 89th was originally training for service in the Pacific arena, and until typical Army fashion, they were sent to England to prepare for the invasion of Fortress Europe. In January 1945, the 89th Infantry Division was attached to a corps of the 3rd Army, where it served as a mop-up division following the 4th Armored Division in its march across Germany. On April 4, 1945, the 4th Armored Division liberated Ohrdruf, a subcamp of the Buchenwald concentration camp, where Herman was sent as a medic to treat the sick and wounded internees. In July 1945, according to Barrett Duff, Herman's brother, he was in Paris on a brief assignment at the Sorbonne University and managed to locate and visit Herman in Rouen, France, where he was waiting with his unit to be returned to the United States and on to the Pacific Theater of Operations. After returning to the United States, the war in the Pacific was winding down, so in late 1945, Herman was discharged from the Army and obtained a position with the Plaza Bank of St. Louis, Missouri, where he advanced to the position of Executive Vice President. The Plaza Bank later merged with the Mercantile Bank, where he served as Vice President of the Loan Department until his retirement. The picture on the slide is William Herman Duff with his unit in Germany in 1945. Barrett Duff, having completed a military education, was prepared for war by the time the United States entered World War II. After Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, and the U.S. declared war on the Axis powers, Barrett volunteered his commission in the U.S. Army as second lieutenant, leaving MIT after completing his first semester there. However, It was some time before the Army announced that it was lowering the age for commission, and even then, the minimum age was set at 20 years old. While waiting to be called into service, Barrett took a job with the DuPont Company on the construction of an explosives plant near Chateau, Oklahoma, that enabled him to reconnect with Peggy Spivey, who had completed her undergraduate work at John Brown University and went on to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Tulsa, Oklahoma. On September 20th, 1942, at Siloam Springs, Arkansas, Margaret Peggy Spivey and Barrett Sale Duff were married. Finally, 1 year after Pearl Harbor, Barrett received his commission as second lieutenant in the United States Army Reserves, with orders to report to active duty on January 19, 1943, at Camp Robinson, Arkansas, as an instructor of new recruits. At the time, he was still not quite 20 years old, and was told that he was the first exception to the minimum age limitation. After serving as officer instructor in several training centers in the United States, the last one at the Tank School at Fort Knox, Kentucky, he was sent overseas to the European Theater of Operations, where he joined the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division as tank platoon leader. He participated in the final drive of the war in Europe, from Bavaria into Czechoslovakia, where his battalion met the Russian army on the banks of the river at Polne, between Strakonice and Prague. After the end of the hostilities in Europe, the 4th Armored Division pulled back into Germany, where Barrett spent 14 months with the Army of Occupation. First, he was promoted to Battalion Assistant S3, in charge of setting up a school for the 37th Tank Battalion. After that was successfully accomplished, he was promoted to S3 Operations Officer, and finally served as the Battalion Executive Officer until the 4th Armored Division was converted to a constabulary brigade. Places where he was posted in Germany include Neuenmark, Deggendorf, Stuttgart, and Wetzlar. In June 1946, he was returned to the United States and separated from active duty as of September 27, 1946. He received an honorable discharge from the United States Army Reserve on July 15, 1952. This photo was taken in spring of 1941, where Corps Commander Major Barrett Sale Duff was congratulated by the War Department's ROTC inspector. Following the inspection, the GCMA, where he attended school, was redesignated as an honor military school. World War II had a strong impact on the Duff family. William Herman Duff was long haunted by his memories of the atrocities of Buchenwald, where he had served as a medic for the internees after the liberation. Family members recall William struggling to move past the war, but his remarriage following the war assisted him greatly in moving past what he had experienced. Many family members say that William Herman Duff was never able to forget the memories he made while participating in World War II. While Marion Crawford Duff was not engaged in military service during the war, his efforts on the farm were important in maintaining morale for his families and his brothers. Letters exchanged during wartime between family members were valuable for all the members. Following the war, Barrett Sale Duff allowed his education and military experience to propel him forward in a career where he could continue to help others. The war had instilled that drive in him, and so he worked for various development engineering companies both in the United States and overseas. The courageous actions of both William Herman Duff and Barrett Sale Duff in World War II would inspire many future family generations to dedicate their lives in service of the United States military. This includes their great-nephew, Michael McGibney, who is currently serving overseas with the United States Marine Corps. Many World War II families did not see a safe return home of their loved ones. Thankfully, the Duff family received home both participating members who were forever changed by what they experienced. World War II had a definitive impact on this family, and its legacy will be remembered forever. The final photo of this presentation is of the Duff family on Thanksgiving in 2010, featuring Barrett Duff in the center.